Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody told me that when I hold the camera in my hand, it gets really shaky and isn't good to watch. So I'm going to try this out where I have it propped up against something so that I can just sit back and relax while I make these videos. So hopefully this works out. Let me know what you think about this new setup in the comment section below. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the Denver Nuggets. They've made a few moves in free agency, re-signing Paul Milsap, bringing in JaMychal Green, and I just want to talk about what they've done and the way that I feel about it, which generally is pretty positive. Before I get too far into it though, I want to remind you to leave a like and subscribe. I've been appreciating all the support I've been receiving lately, and I really hope to see that continue. Without further ado, let's start talking about the Denver Nuggets. Like I said, the two biggest deals that they've gotten done in this free agency period so far are re-signing Paul Milsap and bringing in JaMychal Green. Milsap and Green are both power forward centers who are good defensively and can shoot the three ball on offense. Milsap has a bit more game off the bounce, which makes him a slightly more valuable player than Green, but both of them are going to play similar roles, and they can both play those roles at really high levels. We saw Paul Milsap be a big difference maker for the Nuggets in the series against the Clippers, and we also saw JaMychal Green be a big difference maker for the Clippers in the series against the Nuggets. So both of those players are going to be really valuable to the Nuggets. Getting JaMychal Green, an important rotation cog for the Clippers, away from their team and bringing him onto their team using their mid-level exception was a really nice move for them. And I think that it sets them up to have a really good front court rotation moving forward. A lot of people are going to point towards the loss of Jerami Grant and say that that's going to hurt this team quite a bit. But Jerami Grant was actually one of the worst players on the Grizzlies in terms of his on-off impact. So the Nuggets were really, really good when he was on the court, or when he was off the court. And then they were still good when he was off the court, but not nearly as good, which is a number that I tend to really take into consideration because when you think about it, if your team is playing well when you're on the court, that's great. And if your team is playing poorly when you're on the court, that's not so good. And if they're playing better when you're out of the game than when you're in the game, then clearly there's something wrong with you. And usually this can be construed because for an individual games plus minus, there's a chance that you have a player playing for the whole game with either the starters or the bench. So it might not be showing the individual player's impact so much as it does with just a beneficiary of the group he was playing with. But when you take the net rating for the whole season, Jerami Grant's on the court net rating for the Nuggets versus the Nuggets net rating when Jerami Grant was off the course. They were off of the court. They were significantly better with Jerami Grant out of the game than they were with him in the game. With Paul Milsap, it was the exact opposite. They were better with him in the game than they were with him out of the game. And I think that that is a key showcase of which player was more important for them to bring back. Milsap was also far cheaper than Grant, and I get that he's a bit older. He's not on the same timeline as Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, but they don't need Paul Milsap to be their third best player for much longer because Michael Porter Jr. is coming for that role. For this year, Milsap is going to be a stopgap starter for them, and he's been really important to their team the last couple of years. This team started to accelerate their rebuild and grow as a team and continue to get better as soon as they brought Milsap on, and I think that this was a really good re-signing for them and an important guy for them to keep. Green can play the same role just off the bench. So now their front court rotation, they have Paul Milsap, JaMychal Green, and Nikola Jokic, as well as Bol and Vlatko Kankar. I don't even know if I said Vlatko's name right, but we don't know what Bol's going to turn into. I think that next year he's going to have a full-time NBA contract, not on a two-way, which is a good sign for him and Bol fans everywhere because I know that he's a super popular player amongst NBA fans as a whole. But I'm not sure what kind of production he's actually going to be able to bring to this team next year. He won't start, that's for certain, so he'll be coming off the bench, and I don't know if he'll be able to make an impact. He might need a couple more seasons of NBA strength and conditioning programs in order to get him into the kind of shape he needs to be in order to actually play NBA minutes. But this is about Milsap and Green, and those two guys have locked down the power forward position for this team. Green can also play a bit of small ball center, which gives them a different look for when Nikola Jokic is either in foul trouble or just out of the game. I do think that the Nuggets probably do need to sign a center, and they have an extra roster spot freed up by declining the qualifying offer on Torrey Craig, who has now signed with the Milwaukee Bucks. So I expect them to use that roster spot by signing a minimum center. Noah Vonleh was on the roster last year. He's a free agent right now, but he's still considerably young, and I could see them trying to take a shot on him. It wouldn't be my favorite because he has not proven himself worthy of playing playoff rotation minutes yet. And if you're the Nuggets and you're considering yourself an NBA title contender, you should definitely be looking at players that you view as playable in the playoffs. So if you're going to sign a center to the minimum, I would recommend looking away from a guy like Noah Vonleh, who has potential to grow into that kind of center. And instead, look at a guy like John Henson, who can fill in at that center position when Jokic is out of the game. Obviously, the Nuggets will have to change the way they play quite a bit because John Henson is nowhere near the big man that Nikola Jokic is. But if they want to stick with that same feel, you can play JaMychal Green as your backup five. But John Henson can bring another sort of way that they can play the game as a rim-protecting big man who can also be a decent rim runner. He's got super good hops, one of the better jumpers in the entire NBA, and his rebounding capabilities, rim protection, and shot blocking abilities on the defensive end of the floor, and rim running, pick and roll game on offense is going to be super valuable for this team. And he's definitely a guy I would consider with their final roster spot on the minimum contract. Overall, this roster is looking pretty good heading into next year. You've got a starting lineup of Jamal Murray, Gary Harris. I'm assuming Michael Porter will start next year, but you can also put Will Barton into that 3 position, Paul Millsap, and Nikola Jokic. And that is a really good starting 5, especially if Michael Porter can take the next step. As of right now, he's a terrific scoring forward, can shoot the lights out, and also has a bit of a game off the bounce. If we can see him play the way he did in those seeding games, then he has a chance to develop into an all-star level player as early as this season, and that will absolutely change the fortunes for this Nuggets team. I don't think that he'll quite be ready to make that jump this year. I think that it's probably something we'll see 2 or 3 years down the line. So if he can just improve on the defensive end of the floor and prove that he's at least respectable there, that's what they need from Michael Porter. If he can do that, then he will have cemented himself as a fixture into this starting lineup for the Nuggets, and I think that that's a big reason why they didn't need to overpay for Jeremy Grant. The Pistons are going to not be happy with themselves in a couple of years for signing that Jeremy Grant contract, because it is ridiculously overpaying him. I get that he's a good player, but he doesn't have any ability to create shots for himself off the bounce, and that type of player just should not be getting paid $20 million per year. So I think it was a good plan by the Nuggets to let him walk, and Michael Porter Jr. will take over as that starting 3. Otherwise, they can bring him off the bench as the 6th man. Will Barton is a super valuable player still. He can handle the ball quite a bit for a wing. He's a decent playmaker, and quite honestly, having him on the ball makes him a bit more valuable as a 6th man, in my opinion. I would rather have him running the second unit than I would Michael Porter, since Michael Porter is much more of just a shooter who isn't really going to do as much playmaking as a guy like Will Barton can. So I'd like to see Porter in the starting lineup and Barton coming off the bench, but either way works for me. You have the backcourt of Murray and Harris. Gary Harris needs to get his jumper back to where it was a couple seasons ago, because there was a time where he was a really good three-point shooter. Actually, he was like almost a knockdown three-point shooter. In the past couple of years, his efficiency from distance has really gone down. So he needs to elevate his shot and get it back to the point where it was. Obviously, his injury struggles in the past couple of years has not helped with that. So if he can stay healthy, it'll be a big boost. But he needs to get his jump shot back on track for this team to be the finals contender that they believe they can be. Jamal Murray, if he plays the way he did in the bubble, that's just what the Nuggets need. In the bubble, I would say that Jamal Murray played like a top 15 player in the NBA. And if he can bring that effort all season and be a contender for an all-NBA team, or at the very least an all-star team, that will elevate the Nuggets into the title contender discussion and get them in the running for the top seed in the Western Conference. Off the bench, like I said, Will Barton will be the sixth man for them. Monte Morris, JaMychal Green, and PJ Dozier are all players that I expect to be decent, rotational guys. Green and Morris have both been important cogs in playoff rotations before, but I think PJ Dozier is a guy we can look to take a jump and cement himself as a player who can be in the rotation for the Nuggets. His shooting needs to improve, but he's a good defensive player. Obviously, he's got to make his free throws. He really struggled with that in the series against the Clippers when he got minutes. Actually, I think it was the Lakers when he started playing more. I can't remember which one exactly, but when he did end up getting playoff minutes, he missed a bunch of free throws. So, he has improvements to make to his game, but Michael Malone seems to really like him, really trust him, and I would not be surprised to see him be a part of the playoff rotation for the Nuggets next season. They also signed Facundo Campazzo. I don't know anything about him, just that he's from Argentina and he plays point guard. So maybe he's a rotation guy, maybe not. Moving on, because don't know anything about him. RJ Hampton and Zeke Naji are two young players that I'm really interested in, but I'm not really sure what their role is going to be. I don't think they're going to get too many minutes next season, and they're more developmental type guys. Maybe Zeke Naji can end up being that backup five-man for this team that I was talking about, but I think that he has room to grow, and I'd rather see him have more of a developmental year than a year when he's actually expected to play minutes for his team. So I think that they should probably sign that minimum center type guy that I was talking about before. Outside of that, there's not too much intriguing on this roster. You have like Keita Beats Diop, Vlatko Kankar. If they bring those guys back, I'm not even sure if they're under roster or if their contracts are guaranteed for next season. Same thing with Noah Vonleh. But this Nuggets team is in a good position going into next year. They have 2 stars, 1 superstar, and that is really what you need to cement yourself in the title discussion. I could see this team winning the championship next year. I don't think it's out of the question. They're young. They're on the right trajectory, as we saw them make the playoffs, and then they made the conference finals. Could this be the year they make a NBA Finals run? I don't think it's out of the question, and I'm excited to see what they do. Recapping the offseason for them, I like the Zeke Naji pick. I like the RJ Hampton pick. I'm glad they didn't overpay for Jeremy Grant. I'm glad they kept Paul Millsap, and I'm glad they signed JaMychal Green. That's 5 for 5, guys. Great offseason for the Nuggets. Really happy with what they did, and I think that they have really become a team that's going to be in title contention next year, and I can't wait to see them all play again. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Leave a like and subscribe if you did. Let me know in the comments what you think of this offseason for the Nuggets. Like I said, I love it. I think that's going to be it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you all again very soon.